everybody. This is Vija Williams with Kinney Companies, Keller Williams, and I've got Josh Anderson from Nashville, Tennessee. We're going to learn all about Josh and how we built this, right, Josh?
Yeah, absolutely.
I am really excited about this, Josh. I've been looking forward to this because you and I booked this, a while back, and the reason I'm looking forward to it is that you and I met, I don't even know, 7, 8, 9 years ago, whenever we met, and we were both at sort of similar levels. I think you were higher than me, but what were 30, 40, 50 million, wherever we
Something like that. Just getting into Gary's group, maybe.
Getting into Gary Keller's top agent group. That's right. And I've just watched.
You could be in. That's when the qualifications were like 25 million.
Remember that? And I was the lowest. So I got in at 25 million. I was at 25.5 million. Yeah. And I barely, I was definitely the lowest in the room. And now, what is it now? 70?
I don't know that anybody besides Mindy knows the absolute of what it takes, but it's like all kinds of things. And it's probably 75 or 100 million now.
Yeah.
Which is crazy that it's changed. Yeah. Just the quality of our industry has leveled up that much in the last less than decade. So
true. And so we've kind of gone through this journey together. I ultimately, took a detour and kind of went into more on a leadership path, but I've just, had the privilege of kind of, watching you grow this, right? And, being in the room with you, and, you've talked about victories and defeats, and likewise with you, with me. And so I'm really excited to kind of today, what I'd like to do and what we talked about is going deep on really what the dominoes were, in order, because I think that sometimes we see people like you here on a webinar and we go 130 million, peace out and out. Like that is just too much for me to fathom. We have a lot of newer agents or agents that have, maybe been doing it a few years, and they just go, look, that is so far out of my reach that I can't relate. Right. But before we dive into that, Josh, I'd love to give a background. I think you have a fascinating background. Is that okay if I kind of give
a absolutely.
Feel free to add anything in that I'm not getting right. But you graduated from Louisiana State University, LSU, in international trade and finance, which I think is interesting because you have always struck me as kind of a numbers guy, and you've always kind of understood the numbers really well. Yeah. I think what's amazing and cool, and I want to preface this by saying thank you for your service. You spent 8 years in the U.S. Army, including a 10-month stint in Bagram, Afghanistan during Operation Enduring Freedom. Thank you, my friend. Can't thank you enough. I'm in awe of all of our servicemen and women who are doing that.
Yeah, that was right after 9/11. It was not where I was wanting to go that particular summer for a year. So good, awesome experience, not where I was not happy about it at the time.
Well, no, because your friends, you told me, your friends were backpacking through Europe and you had to go to Bagram.
Yeah, so it was a good experience. I learned, I will say, I came home to the U.S. and I was like ready to just get out and start working, and I grew up a lot in about a year. So it was good. Yeah.
And it's especially hard when your friends are sending you postcards from every stop they're at all over Europe where you wanted to be. That would be tough.
Yeah.
Tough. But so you came back, focused and ready to go, and pretty driven. As long as I've known you, you've been driven. Where does that come from, do you think?
I can tell you exactly where it comes from. I'm the youngest of 4, and we were like super competitive family, and I was always trying to keep up with my brothers. And, it's just one of those things. Being the youngest of pretty much all the cousins is like, you just got to roll with it, and you get beat up a lot, and you just got to it was good when I was competing against people my own age, but I was always competing against people that were, my next closest sibling was 2.5 years older than me. So he was a senior when I was a freshman in high school. So, and he was like Mr. Everything. So I had to keep up with that constantly. So it turned out to be a good thing.
It worked. It worked for you very well.
Yeah.
Well, so what got you into real estate? Let's start at the very beginning. Why real estate? What got you there? And what did those first, what did it look like when you very first started?
Yeah. So I've always been with Keller Williams. I worked I graduated in finance and economics. So I worked at an investment bank here in Nashville for about a year. And then I went and worked at a private client asset firm, like a wealth management firm, for about a year. And it just wasn't filling my bucket of, I wasn't being mentored. I wasn't being really challenged. I wasn't. So, in the meantime, I always kind of had this interest in the background in real estate. And so I just went and got my license one day. And I told my wife, she wasn't my wife at the time, but we were living in Nashville together. And I said, I'm putting in my 2 weeks tomorrow. And I came home and she was like, did you do it? I was like, no. I was scared to do it for literally like a week and a half. And finally I put in my 2 weeks. And so I was like, all right, that's my last paycheck until I don't know. And so it took me so this was April 2006. I got into the business with Keller Williams, and I did my first deal in 3.5 months. I did 23 deals my first year in the business,
Wow.
which was like, I think it was like 3.4 million in volume. And so, the cool part was I didn't know we were going. I knew we were still in a good market, but I didn't know we were headed into a bad market. And I kept hearing all this stuff about mortgages and all these things. And looking back on it, it was kind of a blessing because I didn't really have any money. So I had to be successful and I had to do the basics really, really well. I couldn't go buy leads. I couldn't. I did like 65 open houses my first year in the business. Like I just was cranking out anything I could do that would get me better. Like I would preview tons of houses. And I don't know that I actually sold any houses from open houses or worked with any clients, but I got really comfortable just talking to strangers that walked in a house that wasn't mine. And so it was one of those things that everything people told me to do, I was doing. So Gary was, I heard Gary say, yeah, you should lead generate for 2 hours a day. So like I set up my time blocking to no matter what, every morning I was lead generating. And then, when the market changed, my business grew like 50 to 100% every year for like 5 or 6 years. And in like 2009 or 10, he was like, yeah, 2 hours isn't enough. So then we went to 3 hours and then we went to 4 hours. And so I literally I'm in production and I still do that every day, like 8:30 to noon. I lead generate every day, outbound phone calls. My team knows not to bother me. They don't come in my room. They let me do my thing.
That's incredible. I want to go back to that first year and kind of stay on there a minute because all of that's incredible. But so if you didn't get a ton of business at those open houses, right? Where did those 24 deals come from? Where did your first deal come from?
My first deal came from Craigslist ad. It was actually a military guy that I'm good friends with him, and we always joke about it. He was like my first client. He was coming back from being out of the country, and I don't know, at the time people were like posting Craigslist ads to get buyer leads, and so I tried it because it was free. That was when Craigslist was free. And so I got business there. I did so when we moved, I'm originally from Nashville, but I grew up in Louisiana. And when I moved back, I was moving from a small town that I knew literally everybody. And I didn't know anybody moving back to Nashville. So, we were used to going to parties and like knowing people. Well, we didn't have enough money to do any of that. So I got this idea one day. I got online and I was like, all these events, I want to go to all of them. So I went and volunteered for all these events that I actually wanted to go to, but I had to volunteer for like 2 hours, and then I got in the event for free. But
what kind of events, like music or sports events, or?
Yeah, it could be like a beer festival. It could be like a nonprofit type event that they were putting on. So it was just doing anything and everything to build my database. I didn't really know I was like formally building my database, but now people come to Nashville and they're like, how do you know so many people? And I'm like, dude, I spent, 15 years just like being in real estate, lead generating, lead follow-up. And then the other 50 hours a week was literally networking events for the Nashville Chamber or the Convention and Visitors Bureau or these, just different nonprofits. I got on nonprofit boards. I was literally doing anything and everything I could to build my database just to talk to people. But that was so, and I told the executive directors or the chairs of the events, I said, I don't know anybody. And I literally would stand next to them until they introduced me to people. And then I would get those people's contact information And I would follow up with them and say, hey, can we grab coffee? I'd love to learn more about your business. And that's how I built my business. So like when I first got in the business, I didn't have a CRM. I literally had an Excel sheet, and it was name, phone number, email address, cell phone number, and then like a note section. And I would write them a handwritten note. I'd put 2 or 3 business cards in there, and then I'd call them 3 or 4 days later. And that was like that was like Gary's little box, right? That's what I did. I sent letter, called 3 to 4 days later, knowing that the mail was going to be, delayed a little bit. Then I would call them, and then I would send them an email, and then I'd follow up with like a text message or another phone call and say, hey, do you want to grab? So that was kind of like my modified, like 4 touches in 1 week, and really trying to do the 8x8 with everybody. I looking back on it, I didn't know it, but I literally textbook did everything Gary said, like all the basics, all the lead gen, all the time blocking. I literally did it to a T. But I did it because I didn't have any money. Like I had to do it. So it was kind of like it worked.
That's incredible. So go back to your script again. So your script was basically learning about them and learning about their business.
Yeah, because I was calling, it was kind of crazy. I would call business owners that were people that probably shouldn't have taken my call either. And I was like, my brother was like, just call them, that they put their pants on just like you do. And I was like, okay. So I called them, and, it was one of those things that they were like, yeah, I'll have coffee with you. And I just wanted to like learn about their business. How'd you get from where I am to where you are? Like, and there were these common denominators, the same thing that Gary tells. I mean, it was all the basics. Like they didn't have any side hustles. They just went all in on what they were doing. So that's how I met a bunch of people.
There's a book, I'm looking it up right now. There's a book I read that this reminds me of. And it's called, I'm just trying to find it right now. It's called A Curious Mind, The Secret to a Bigger Life by Brian Grazer, which I loved because I too am just a curious person. Like I think, Josh, you probably get joy out of just learning about people.
Yeah.
I mean, what am I doing now, right? This is my joy too. And so, but that book is a really good book for some people, maybe for you too, because that's what Brian Grazer did, who's a very famous Hollywood, producer and director. That's how he got where he got, just a bunch of informational interviews, just like that. And what I like about your story, especially for new agents watching, is it's a very simple system and process. I think that those words get intimidating. System, process. You're like, I'm going to do 4 things. You get on a spreadsheet. I'm going to check off if I did them or if I didn't do them. It's just not that. It's just not that hard, is it? I mean, that's.
And really one of the books I read when somebody gave me this book when I first got in the business. Have you ever heard of Never Eat Alone?
I've heard of it, but Brian Tracy, is that?
No, it's Keith Ferrazzi.
Okay.
And it basically is like, you're going to eat breakfast and lunch anyway. You might as well like go have lunch with somebody different. That's not like a friend, somebody that might be a business that you aspire to be. Maybe it's in a different industry. Maybe it's in the same industry, but just go have lunch with somebody every day.
Yeah.
Times a week or once a week, whatever it ends up being, but it's Never Eat Alone. It's a good book.
If you guys are hesitating, if anyone here, there's 2 reasons you're hesitating to call people. You don't know who to call, or you don't know what to say. So if you don't know what to say, because we're telling you this is a great way to start who to call. If you don't know what to say, come up with 5 or 6 questions, and that really becomes your script. It's just questions.
You just ask questions and shut up. That's all. I mean, that's what you do. And really, the only reason you don't call is because you're value deficient. It's not call reluctance as much as you don't have value. You don't think that you have value to add to the relationship or to the phone call.
Oh, I love that.
Most people call it, just use the term call reluctance, but they only have call reluctance because they don't have value, or they don't think they have value to add.
Oh, I love that. Which really does boil down to that they just don't know what to say. I love that. That's brilliant. So, okay. So we go into our first year. You were hustling. I mean, you had to pay bills, you had to pay rent at the time, mortgage, whatever you have. And you sell your 24 homes, and it sounds like it's just a combination. Correct me if I'm wrong. It sounds like it's a combination of sort of internet, networking, friends of friends, that type of a thing. Is that right?
Yeah. Like I called some for sale by owners. My first listing ever, 15 years later, I still stay in touch with him, is a guy named Steve Goddard. And he literally, I sent that guy so many postcards and handwritten notes. And one day he called me and he was like, hey, Josh, this is Steve Goddard. I just got your postcard in the mail. And I was like, yes, sir. And he said, I mean, how old are you? You look like you're in high school still. And I was like, okay. Well, I said, I don't know that really matters. I said, can I help you get your home sold? And he was like, he was taken back by my response. And he said, sure. Can you come over, tomorrow at 3? And I was like, huh? I didn't have a listing presentation. I was like, yep, I'll be ready. And I mean, I would love to have the recording of me trying to get through a listing presentation from a for sale by owner. And anyway, he's referred me business. We've stayed in touch. He comes to client events, or he did before 2020. And I call him 3 or 4 times a year, and we just kind of just catch up and talk.
I just want to interject all of our new agents watching, because I know we get a lot of new agents watching. All of you guys just go get the appointment. That is a great example. You get the appointment. 24 hours is plenty of time to figure something out. Because Josh managed to figure something out. There is someone that can help you get a listing presentation and figure it out. I love that story.
Oh, and they're so much better now. I mean, in 2006, there was a listing presentation, but I mean, I literally like stapled it together and just kind of threw it. And, I just kind of like worked my way through, and he was like, I mean, I can't believe he listed his property with me, but we sold it. It was like $174,000. And, we've stayed in touch for 15 years.
So my first listing was like $165,000. It was like in 2002, because I'm older than you, I'm a lot older than you. And I remember it was friends, actually. It was a referral. And I literally looked at him, I go, I don't think you should have me list your home. That was my listing presentation. I don't really know what I'm doing. I'm probably going to screw up on the paperwork. They're like, no, actually, we want you to. We know at the end of the day, you're going to negotiate really well. Figure this out, Vija. Like, we're signing with you. And I was like, I don't think so. I don't think you should do this. Anyway, probably don't do that. Probably don't go ahead and do the script for my first one. Anyway, that's awesome. Okay. So when did you decide? So you did 24 units your first year. Do you remember your progression, Josh, of like units,
Yeah. I mean, I think, so I did 3.4 million in volume my first year. And then I did like 6.7. Then I did like
actual 6.7 million is what, like 48, 50 deals?
It wasn't even 40. It was like 42 deals. Okay. And then I did like 54, 55 deals, and the price points were a little bit higher. And a big, people always go, well, what were like the defining moments at different points in your career? And at about somewhere between year 2 and year 2.5, I went with my cousin who owned a business. And I was like asking him all these questions about his business. I said, when am I going to start getting referrals? And he was like, year 3, like literally to the day, year 3, you're going to start getting referrals. And I was like, why do I have to wait another year? It's like, I want them now. And literally to the day, April of 2009, I started getting consistent referrals. It was kind of crazy. I called him and I was like, literally am getting referrals now. Like, how'd you know? He was like, I don't know. He's like, the 3-year mark. It's just like, you're not just jumping in the business. Like you're legit.
You know what else happens at year 3, Josh? The other thing that happens year 3, almost like clockwork, like magic, is you start, that's the first year, anyway, for me, everyone I know, where you get that first, you sold them the house and then you list it.
Yeah, that's right.
Something about year 3-ish or whatever, that always happens. Like it's your first client it's like, the second transaction. It's so funny. So, okay. So what was the evolution of you going from, because by now you're pretty successful. I mean, like you're now getting to the top of the office roster in production, right? You're getting up there, you're top 20% by now. At what point did you hire someone? Like, what did that look like? What was that stuff like?
So I hired a very part-time assistant in like late 2007 for like 15 hours a week, basically to do contract to close.
A year or so then.
Yeah. And I really hired my first real assistant in late 2009, full-time. So about 3 years in, and that was just kind of where I said, okay, I can't really justify or afford this, but if I take those hours, by the way, horrible at paperwork, like horrible.
Well, of course you are. You're good at sales. They don't
Yeah,
go.
yeah, right. So when you lose an earnest money check and you have to call your client and tell them you lost your earnest money check, it just,
Been there, Josh. I've been there.
yeah. And then like the day that you call them in the morning and then that afternoon you find it lodged underneath your seat of your car. Yeah, really awesome.
That's when you hire an assistant. So
That's when I hire.
you were kind of in that 40 to 50 deal mode, though. It sounds like
Yeah,
when you kind of went like,
yeah.
all right, hiring.
And I think that so how I justified it was if I can take these hours that I'm not being efficient doing paperwork, and I can hire this person, I can take those hours and lead generate and lead follow up, then I'm not going to have an issue. Like I'm absolutely going to be able to do this, and it worked out. And then in early 2010, I hired my first buyer's agent. But it was one of those things that I did your typical classic small business. Hired probably 4 to 6 months later. I mean, like when I was hiring somebody, I was like, oh crap, I need to hire somebody. I need them to start today. And I got on Craigslist again and, hired somebody for as cheap as I could hire somebody because not knowing. And so for anybody that's listening, I would tell you, if I was doing this all over again, I would pay somebody as much as I could possibly pay and be as uncomfortable as possible, because your administrative team really is the backbone of you being able to kind of throw stuff over the back of your, over your shoulder, and they're catching it. If they're great at what they do, they're catching it and letting you go do sales and they'll figure it out. They obviously need coaching and training. And that's another thing that we've done horrible jobs. I think we do a horrible job of is we hire somebody that's totally kick ass, and they don't get the training, and then we get mad at them. And I've failed. We can talk all day long about failures.
Well, most of our fails come with our hires. They come with, with
Yeah.
our failures there. So when you hired an assistant, what was their general job description? You mentioned earlier you had them do transaction coordinating, it sounds like.
Yeah. So very different. I think when you're doing 40 or 50 deals a year, and my first full-time assistant took us to 78 transactions before we parted ways. But she was doing 78 transactions, plus she was doing, Facebook marketing, plus she was doing like, hey, I need you to go get my dry cleaning occasionally, or I need you to do this. So, I mean, she was doing, I think when you're at 40 or 50 deals, you can have somebody doing a lot of different things for you. I know Diane Griffin, she's going to be on in a couple of weeks. Her first hire was a personal assistant because she was just going through life changes, and she needed a personal assistant to help with the kids more than she needed, a professional assistant in her business. So it really, I think one of the things people do wrong in our industry is they go, "Oh, I want my business to look like Josh Anderson's," and they reach out to me and go, "Hey, can I have your job description for an EA?" Which is totally fine. Anybody listening, you can have as many of my documents as you want. What you need to find out what gives you energy and what takes energy from you, and create a job description around that, rather than just going, oh, well, this guy does a gazillion deals and we should just get Ben Kinney's or whoever's
100%.
because he's successful with it. And it's like, yeah, but what he needs and what you need might be like literally a 180 of each other.
Yeah. In fact, last week's webinar with Christy Grossman and Stephanie Brackett were on this exact topic. What do you do for your first hire? And it's funny because we spent the first half of the webinar talking about how to prepare. And everyone's like, well, I thought I was going to get on and find out what to post on Indeed and, how much to pay them. And we spent the first half an hour on, clarity of job description, clarity of, are you hiring someone to buy time back? Or are you hiring someone to grow?
So
these are the things, right?
I think the easiest thing for somebody that's listening, that's looking at potentially hiring an assistant, like spend 1 week documenting your work life. And I don't know who told me this. It might've been somebody in Gary's group. It might've been just anyway, like write down literally everything that you do for an entire day. And which things do you sit down at your desk and go, God, I don't want to write this again. I don't want to do this. That's how you create your job description. The things that give you energy and that you're good at, go all in on them. And the things that you suck at, then just don't do them. like hire somebody that loves to do that stuff. I've got an administrative team that loves doing administrative stuff. And that's why they're so good, because they love it. They're like, why would you ever, like, I wouldn't be a realtor. They just wouldn't.
Oh yeah, 100%. I love that. And a lot of you guys have really strong freelance transaction coordinators in your area like we do here. And that's your first hire. You're paying them out of your proceeds of your sales. It's typically anywhere from, $300 to $500, I find, nationwide, depending on your market. And you can immediately, my third transaction in real estate, I've never not had a TC. I only transacted 2 transactions on my own. And it's funny, Josh, because
like your worst 2 deals.
My worst 2 deals, probably where I lost this money, right? But very soon, the minute I was able, just on a total side note, just like real estate geeking out right now, the minute I was able to, I started writing, it's a policy on my team, no checks, it's all wire. We have been wiring earnest money since before you could probably legitimately wire earnest money. Yeah. Once you've lost a check, I was like, no checks allowed on this team. All earnest money is wired.
Yeah. So my team won't, they will not give me, they're like, you can't, no. They just bring it to my wife.
You're not allowed to hold a check. I am not allowed to either. What they're allowed to do is they're allowed, my husband has allowed them to put it in my purse because he knows I'll bring my purse home. But like there's a whole like relay that goes on where I don't know the check's in there because somehow my brain will lose it. Like if I just know it's there. Yeah, that's a different topic. We could talk for an hour on that. But I do want to say that I want to like just emphasize what you said, Josh, which is, you do kind of to a certain extent have to hire around yourself, don't you? And because we all kind of have superpowers that are random. Like, what's your superpower besides selling real estate? Usually we all have one random thing we like to do or we're good at.
Yeah.
Do you have like a superpower?
So my superpower I've kind of figured out is work ethic. And it just like, for whatever it's worth, like I grew up on a 3,000 acre farm and you just started working early. And that's just like, that was one thing that my dad didn't negotiate on. Like we all have like super work ethic and I'll just outwork somebody. And I can't get rid of it. It's just like, I can't even go on vacation without thinking about like, oh, all these ideas for business and all the, like, I'm always thinking about it. And I get up at 4:30 every morning. I get to the office early and I just outwork people. That's my, I think that's what it is. And my business coach said, highly underrated superpower, basically like high tolerance for boredom is a highly underrated superpower.
Yes.
A high tolerance for boredom. And that really hit home with me because there was about 3 years ago, we had a mastermind in Austin with Gary, and I raised my hand and I just said, Gary, I'm burnt out. Like I'm cranking out 60, 70, 80, 110 hour weeks, whatever it is from start to finish. And I just said, what? He's like, he said, business success is boring, is basically what he said. And I was like, oh, and it just hit me like, I'm doing all the right things. And it's not like I wasn't really burnt out. I was just like doing so much repetitive stuff. And he said, look at all the biggest business, most successful business in the world. They have great systems and processes, and I guarantee you Bill Gates does the same thing every single day. Jeff Bezos pretty much does the same thing every day.
Not today. Did you hear the news?
No. Oh yeah, I did. I read that. Yeah. He's no longer
not doing
the executive chairman.
Yeah, well, actually he is. That's not till July. I love that. I think Gary's famous quote is "Come to peace with the boredom of mastery," which is basically what you're saying. We'd have to go way back in the archives. Ben and I did a webinar a year or two ago on reasons people quit. It's a really good webinar, and we went deep a little bit on that one, and we talked about that. And one of the number one reasons people quit is boredom.
Yeah.
And you can't master anything without 10,000 hours. It's boring.
Well, and I find that agents get bored easily, and then they want the shiny object, and then they go to the shiny object and it doesn't quite do it for them, or they don't do it for long enough. And then they go back to the boredom and they're like, oh my God, this is boring. And I think you just have to get comfortable with it. And it's like, I love it. It just is what it is.
I'm guilty, by the way. I'm guilty, but I'm also aware of it, and I figure out Jedi mind tricks to get through it. Right.
Yeah.
So I want to go back. So we covered your first hire, and now we're moving you into 2010. How
Yep.
many units? So you have one assistant. They brought you to about 72 units. Is that ish?
78. Yeah. 78 units. So she was with me through 2000, from like late or mid to late 2009 through like 2011 or 12.
Okay.
So it's probably 2011 because she brought us to 78 transactions. So I think that was 2011, and that was also a big year for me. September of 2011 is when I came back from Mega Camp, and Gary had talked about this thing called the showing agent model, and nobody was actually doing it. And so Aaron Armstrong and I were like, we were roommates for every conference, and we both said, that's we're not bringing anything back to our assistants other than we're figuring this out. And so we still implement that model, 9, 10 years later, and it has served us really well. So that was another kind of pivotal moment for us. But it
Well,
did
walk
take,
us through what that model is and what it looks like. This is great.
yeah. So the showing agent model was the idea that you could have kind of a junior agent or somebody else on your team that's helping you show the properties, because so often we get bottlenecked in showing properties. So you have somebody come in to Nashville from being, in Seattle or wherever, and they want to look at houses the entire time. Well, okay, they're in town for 4 days, and maybe that's only 2 days during the week and 2 days on the weekend. Then you're losing 2 days worth of, you're losing 40% of your lead generation and lead follow-up time for that particular week. And so how do we make it more efficient? And we kind of fumbled with it to begin with, but it came down to, we fumbled with it because we weren't sure that it would actually work, because nobody was really doing it. And I don't know that we fully believed in it. And we fumbled on the packaging and business partners and how to do it. And then once we messed it up 2 or 3 times, and then we nailed it, and we were like, oh my God. And that's when my lead buyer's agent at the time was, she went from 40 or 50 transactions to over 100 transactions in a year.
Yeah.
And so it really made her a lot more money. It made the showing agent a lot more money, and it made us a lot more efficient in what we were doing.
And in your showing agent model, who can you walk us through who did what? Who did the buyer consult? Who showed him houses? Who negotiated the contract?
Yeah. So basically the showing agent actually just showed properties. And the buyer, so they would physically be at the buyer consultation. But the senior agent on the team, or the lead agent, was actually conducting the buyer consultation and going through the entire process, what to expect next. And then they would go out with the junior agent or the showing agent. And then from there, once they were ready to write an offer, they all kind of got back together, wrote the offer, negotiated the offer. So senior agent was doing the big rocks of the transaction.
Got it. So you say senior agent. So I'm envisioning this team of you and an assistant and a showing agent. But what did growth look like after that, Josh?
Yeah, and I'll tell you. So it was a full-time assistant, and it was a buyer's agent, and then it was a showing agent. I would probably do it a little bit different if I was doing it again. Not far different, but I would probably before. So I personally don't think having somebody titled as a lead buyer's agent is good, because when that lead buyer's agent leaves, they're if everything's running through them, that hurts your business. I mean, it like cripples your buyer side of your business. So we've kind of shifted to the idea of senior agents on the team and having roving showing agents, rather than like we used to have it where each senior agent, or each, the lead agent had like 2 showing agents. So we can change that up. If I was doing it again, though, I would have the most expensive administrative hire I could afford, and I would have 2 junior agents or showing agents, and I would quarterback all the deals.
So there's a lot of, agents who this is new information for. Can you, and I know the difference, but I would like you to explain it.
Sure.
Can you really share the difference between a buyer's agent and a showing agent?
Yeah. So a buyer's agent on our team can do a deal on their own, or they can do a deal with a showing agent. A senior agent on our team has been with us for, let's say 3 years or more. Two of the girls on my team have been with me for 8 and 10 years. So they're like the two senior agents on the team. And they, a showing agent isn't allowed. They're attached at the hip and they're a part of every single conversation, group texts, everything with the clients, but they're not writing the offers. They're not negotiating the offers, but they're part of those calls. And we'll even have them write the offers, but we'll like look over them writing the offers and then we'll correct it if needed. So that's probably the biggest piece that really took our business to the next level from a number of transactions and like a dollar per hour perspective. And we felt like we could provide our clients with a higher level of service because we're in a really super low inventory market and have been for 7 years. So that's a situation where if the agent is working, if they're in a meeting and something hits the market, the showing agent can still go show property.
I think it's a good time to interject and to really clarify the numbers a little bit, Josh, because when were you feeling that squeeze? So it was you and an assistant. And when, because you said you hired a showing agent too late, you were already scrambling by then. How many transactions-ish were you at that point?
I think it depends on the person and their capacity, but I would say generally speaking, if you do more than an average of 4 transactions a month for more than about a year or two, you're just getting run ragged. Like you were. So I think anything around between 4 and 5 transactions, you absolutely have to get a showing agent.
Yeah.
Because it especially depends on how many A buyers you have on your plate at the time. And also we have some clients that are like, hey, just let me know what we need to do. And we have other clients that literally want to talk on the phone every day. So it really kind of depends on the client and what your capacity is. But I would say somewhere, it could even be around between, like, if you're hovering back and forth between 3 and 4 transactions a month, somewhere between 3 and 5, you're probably on the verge of needing a showing agent. But the question is, if you're doing 36 to 48 transactions on your own per year, can you get to the next level of feeding that showing agent where they can make a certain amount of money? And I think part of it depends on the price point in your market. There's a lot of people that tell me, oh, that won't work in my market. It works in every market. You haven't believed in it enough to make it work. So, somebody asked if the showing agents are licensed. They're absolutely licensed. I mean, their training program is the exact same as a buyer's agent training program. Like they're previewing a certain amount of houses. They're still lead generating. They're just not lead generating as consistently as the senior agent. But if the senior agent's a senior agent for a reason on the team, they should have better scripts and better conversion ratios and everything else anyway. So you'd want them in the office more lead generating so the showing agents can be out. But we're still having scripts practice for the or the showing agents and all of that.
Are you comfortable sharing splits or what you pay, what that pay structure looks like?
Yeah. So on our team, showing agents get 15%. So to put context around that, our average price point's about $515,000. So they can make $75,000 to $100,000 in their first year. They've just got to do, they're doing 35 or 40 transactions, but they can make that. So 35% goes to the senior agent, and some people go, well, that's kind of like flip flop, like the junior agent's doing all the work. I'm like, yeah, but they're also in a training program, so they can't move out of the showing agent role for 12 months on our team. Some people do it for 5 deals or 10 deals. I personally don't think you can learn what you need to learn in 5 or 10 deals. Even though the transaction is basically the same each time, after 5 deals, you don't have enough experience to go talk to a seller or a buyer. I just don't think you can.
Well, and I'll go farther, Josh. In these tight inventory competitive markets, which many of us are in, most major metropolises have, it is really hard to win multiple offers if you're a new agent. You just don't have it's really hard to get your clients on these assets that are $500,000, $1 million, right? It's really hard to get them to waive everything they need to waive, be as aggressive as they need to handle.
They don't have negotiating experience. They don't know what
yeah.
They don't know what verbiage to write in there. They're not, like our team has the ability to sit down and like really look at what's happening in the market. And if you're an individual agent, that it becomes very hard to like spend an extra hour studying the market, seeing what other people are writing, talking to your friends on the West Coast and go, hey, what verbiage are you using to win deals? And we have the ability to do that. And so we almost always beat out an individual agent.
And then we have rock stars like Joy, who's been winning multiple offers, and she's new. Joy, you're a rock star, and you're also an outlier, and you're going to be a really successful agent. It's hard, And so I really agree with Josh that they tend to, a newer agent gets confidence through competence. So the more deals they have and the more experience they have, they get better. You can go and write your first deal and win, guys. Any new agent watching, I'm not like, you go win and you do you. And there's a lot of resources that you guys are probably aggressively, asking for and tackling. So I love this conversation. So Josh, I like that a lot. So you're kind of saying, hey, maybe you'd start with a showing agent, right? To help you, and then move into a full-fledged buyer agent where you're handing over the buyer. Whereas a showing agent, you're still kind of handling the client.
Well, I think a lot of people they see what teams are doing either in their market or somebody on stage is being interviewed, and they just want to go hurry up and hire a buyer's agent. And they're not really, they see it happening, but they don't really know why they're doing it. And I just think, why not, until you get to a point where you're doing too many transactions or you want to focus on one side or the other, hire a showing agent if you're the rainmaker or the only sole agent. And that's the way that you're going to like default just train the heck out of that person. They're going to be attached to your hip for the next 12 months on every single deal. Like our agents are doing group texts with everybody involved. So junior agent, senior agent, and the clients. Mm-hmm. So everybody's always in the loop. They're not getting questions off on the side from a separate text. Like they are always in the know. Because the last thing we want to happen is like, it's a husband and wife. Husband asks the showing agent a question, and then the wife asks the senior agent a question, and they talk at night and they're like, they got two different answers. Like we want to be walking and talking the same. That's why we make the showing agent sit in on every buyer consultation. Even if they're not going to be working on that deal, we need them to hear the language of real estate and what we say and how we package it and how we're going to win deals for them, how we're going to find off-market deals for them. Like that, those are the things that we're wanting to walk and talk the same.
Our teams are identical, Josh. Everything you do is exactly what we do. It's how we structure it. It's so similar.
It has to be that way if you want it to be cohesive and you want I mean, from an efficiency standpoint, that's what you have to do. So I think it's, there's tons of different ways to do it, but I think there are plenty of videos on, like, if you want to dig into the showing agent model, there's plenty of videos. If you have questions, you're welcome to email me or call me, whatever it is. And I'm happy to like walk you through it. It's just, we feel like a 1-year training program for somebody to make $50,000 to $100,000 on our team. Plus, if they're doing it at a high level, they're doing probably somewhere between 4 to 5 years worth of real estate transactions in 12 months on our team. And they're a part of hundreds and hundreds of conversations that they wouldn't have the opportunity to be a part of if they were just doing it on their own.
Yeah. So I want to move on to kind of, build up your team and kind of, how do we get to where we are now? But I want to restate something you said that I think was smart and I'd like everybody to get. And that is that what Josh said, and he kind of glossed by it, and I just want to stay on in a minute. If you got an assistant and you're thinking, all right, now my next step's a showing agent, which is a perfect progression in my mind. Josh said something that was smart. And he said, well, it's not just about helping you, it's can they make a living? Can they make a significant, enough income on a 12-month basis? Do you have enough leads, basically, to feed them, to have them make a decent living? Because I think a lot of the times we think about our needs and we don't think about the fact, like, are they going to be able to survive for a year making the income they would make, right? So I just thought that was smart. I wanted to
Yeah.
bring it up.
Well, they're not going to stay with you long term if they're making 15 or 20 or 30 grand a year. The reason the girls that are with me that have been with me for 8 and 10 years, I mean, I think they look at it and go, okay, our marketing's taken care of. Our all of our we have what most teams would deem too many assistants. But 73, 75% of our business is either some type of sphere deal. So it's either agent referral from around the country, it's a past client, it's a referral source of some sort. And so when I look at that, Serena, we have eight assistants. So
Well,
two
let's
virtual
work our way
assistants.
up to that. I want to work our way up to what
Okay.
your team looks
Okay.
like now, like
Um,
progression. Yeah.
yeah. And so the where I was going with that is just the idea that they make us, I mean, they both make 200, 250, $300,000 a year. We had one on our team that was making over $400,000 a year as a show, and somebody goes, well, you're giving up too much. And it's like, well, yeah, but a really well-run, well-oiled machine team, you aren't actually giving up much because I'm keeping them in production and that's it. Like they're not dealing with, I mean, they're not even scheduling their own showings. I mean, we literally do everything for them. Now, if they need to change their showings, then fine, they need to change their showings. But we're doing the marketing, we're doing the advertising, the blogs, the videos. We're producing the leads. We're literally doing everything. And so people only leave if they don't see an opportunity to grow. They're not making enough money. I mean, there's only a handful of reasons people leave. It's either crappy culture or, I mean, there's 3 or 4 things, right?
That's so
So,
true. Yeah,
so if you have the culture piece and you have the true systems and processes and models, there shouldn't be a reason people leave.
so build it up for us. We have you, an assistant, showing agent, then buyer's agent, or vice versa, whatever you did. And then
Yeah.
now, how did it grow? And
Yeah,
then how many units at each juncture?
yeah. So the original assistant was more of kind of a catch-all assistant. When we parted ways, we went and looked for a so what is different in our business now is everybody literally does their one thing. So we have a director of operations, we have a listing manager, we have transaction coordinators, and then we have 2 virtual assistants working in the background. We have a director of marketing. So like what's different is I wasn't able to justify or afford all those positions when we were doing 78 transactions a year. But I also knew that like, hey, our transaction coordinator isn't going to get energy from doing Facebook posts, right? So it's one of those things that's kind of where we grew. It was like we would hire an agent and then we'd hire another assistant. Then we'd hire an agent, then we'd hire an assistant. So kind of, fast forwarding to like 2019 was the first time that we crossed over the elusive 100 million mark. That's really, by the way, not that big of a deal. Just like,
I think it's a big deal. And I think it's a big deal.
well, I thought it was this massive deal, and then you do it, and you're like, oh, okay. But I mean, it's cool, but it's one of those things anyway. So in 2020, we crushed our 2019 numbers. We were up like 30%. So we did about 134 million in volume, 4 million in GCI, and that was cool. But we're still not even running on all cylinders. We're working on it, but it's like every time you get to one level, you're working on getting to the next level. And you said something when we first started this podcast that just about like the idea of, gosh, what did you say? I just lost it. It'll come back to me in just a second. But it's no matter where you are. Oh, so you said people can't really relate with a $135 million producer. And generally speaking, I would absolutely agree with that. But I'd also tell people that are at $5 million, I just have more problems than you have. Like we have the same issues for sure. And it comes down to there's one issue, and it's really hiring, and getting into business with the right talent. That's all it comes down to. And you guys might not be experiencing that yet because you haven't done it enough. But it doesn't matter if you're at 135 million. You guys have the exact same problems I have, and it's the core activities. Like we never have enough time in the day. How many times do you say that to yourself? Or we're never good enough at lead generate, or we don't do enough lead generation, or it's not good enough, or enough time for lead follow-up, or we're not good enough at being organized, or we're not good enough at time blocking, or what if our scripts were just a little bit better to where we could make, convert one more deal per week, or one more appointment to, listing to held, or appointment to held ratio. So it's all those things you're just layering in. It's just the basics. I mean, the only thing I've done better than everybody else, or a lot of people, is the idea that I've been super duper consistent over a 15-year period, day in and day out. Like, literally the building could be on fire and I'm going to finish my damn lead generation. Like, that's just what it is.
And that's such an important message for everybody to get, that, it's a contact sport. Everyone here signed up for a sales career in real estate. And if you're scared to pick up the phone, you got to think about if this is the right career for you, because that's what it takes. It just takes phone and FaceTime. So how many units, I'm curious, did it take to hit 134 million last year?
266.
That makes sense, because you said your average price was about 500. So I probably could have done the math and guessed that. Yeah, what are you going to do this year, do you think?
So our goal is 304.5 million in gross commissions.
That's fantastic.
Which is 165 million. So I think one thing that we have, in the past, I've kind of, we don't create goals anymore. We do goals all based on the team, and then we kind of tally it up together. I used to kind of like hammer the team a little bit and be like, guys, let's do 200 million. Like, come on. And then they'd reluctantly agree, and then I'd get mad at the end of the year when we didn't hit it. But we've really kind of pulled back. And one thing that I've really tried hard to do is really tie their goals to their personal life. Like, what's going to happen if you don't hit these goals? Because if you have a professional goal and you don't need to hit it, it's not really that big of a deal at the end of the day, right? But if you really are trying to hit a goal and it matters from a personal perspective, you'll figure out a way to do it.
100%. I mean, the only reason anyone's ever with our company is because they view us as a vehicle to get to their personal goals. I mean, that's really what makes this a win-win partnership with our people.
Yeah. And so, we're working a lot harder to get creative this year. We're big on client events. We haven't been able to do client events. So we've done lots of giveaways. We're doing a Valentine's Day staycation in Nashville, and just doing things that are giveaways, the Peloton giveaways, and the just different stuff, right? But it's also the culture internally. It's getting interactive with the spouses. It's really like trying to be full on, here for the team. And everybody's reacted different to the pandemic. I mean, we've got some people that completely didn't phase them, and we've got other people that got some stuff going on personally that it just is what it is. So, yeah.
How many agents so you have 8 assistants and VAs. How many sales people?
So we just, we're at 16 people. Okay. So we're literally at 50-50. And I think we can bring on a couple more agents before we have to hire another admin.
So about 8 agents, about 8 admin. Right.
But here's the thing for me, like, I don't need a commission to make a commission. I don't need to make a sale. If I don't want to do this business, if I can't create relationships and create like a certain brand and create a certain culture, it's just too dang hard of a business not to make a certain amount of money, but also to have fun. Like, I look at my work life and my work family, and I spend as much time with them as I do my personal family. And then the other 8 hours is for sleeping, right? So, it's, you break your life up into 3 parts. It's sleeping, it's personal, and it's professional. And so if you're working with people that you don't want to be in business with, life's too short. Get out of business with them. Go find awesome, fun people that also want to kick ass.
100 and 1,000%. Yes. Yeah. Yes to that. I've been there, learned that the hard way. Right.
And we parted ways with somebody in 2020 that is probably the best salesperson we've ever had from a scripts and phone skills. And her personal life was a disaster, and it was carrying over into her professional life. And it just wasn't good. It was like we had to cut out the cancer.
That's right.
So
What do you think is the primary reason for your success?
um, for me, it's like I'll do whatever it takes to win, and winning to me was just like I want to be if I'm gonna come to work every day, I want to be the best, whatever that means. It doesn't mean I have to be number one in the world or even number one in Nashville, but I want to create an awesome brand, and I think you never really get to a 10. We start edging up to 9, and then the bar raises again. And so I just don't ever believe you get to a 10 unless you're Tom Brady or somebody like that. I mean,
He is the GOAT, isn't he? I
he
would
is
love
the goat.
that.
Yeah.
Seahawks and Tom Brady have an interesting relationship, but he is the GOAT. I just can't deny it.
But
Uh,
even not at 10, because a 10 for him would be 10 out of 10 on Super Bowls, right?
I actually don't think he would say he's a 10. Yeah, I think you're
Yeah.
right. Last final question, Josh, for everybody watching who is very inspired by you. I'm inspired by you.
Yep.
What advice do you have an agent that's just getting started, or that is maybe successfully selling and at that first juncture where they're about to make that first hire, somewhere between getting started and wanting to make their first hire? What's the biggest piece of advice you have for them?
Around hiring or just in
Around
general?
anything, around anything. If you were back at that stage and you were that Josh back in 2009.
So, well, I would say I'll give a piece on each one of them. One, I would say do the basics and do them at a super high level and do them consistently, literally every single day. If you can't commit to them every day, then only do one of them, whichever one you deem the most important. To me, lead generation is the one thing that fixes everything, right? Um, and then as far as hiring goes, I would tell everybody, nobody teaches you how to hire. I would go take career visioning or recruit select or whatever you call it, whatever it is. Go get with a recruiter in your town, but take career visioning literally 15 times. I think that is the hardest thing for me to slow down on. And even if you don't do the full process, which you should, I'm not telling you not to, but there are pieces of the process, in my opinion, that you can get a better bang for your buck out of. And like for me, one of the things that's not negotiable, I'm going 3 levels deep on references. And if I can't get them, not hiring. I'm just not.
Yeah.
Because I think it's weird that if I can't call one of your references and they can't give me somebody else that you've worked with. I just think so that's the hardest thing because I was never trained on it. I never went to school for it. And hiring people, especially for me, it's administrative people. My brain doesn't work as an administrative person. So hiring administrative people for me is really difficult. And if you're not willing to do the hiring yourself, go find, like we just hired a selection specialist. So they're not a recruiting firm. They help us select people. And so if that's the route you're going to go, then go that route. We're kind of like borderline too busy right now to sit down and sift through 250 resumes. So we decided to hire somebody that's proven talent that another KW agent referred us, and that's what we're doing. So go figure out which pieces are important and go create your own job description around it.
Well, I love this. So I got a lot out of today, but what I really got was consistency, consistently lead gen 2 hours a day. End of story. The number one thing we can deliver a current team or a future team is listings, because everything stems from listings and that comes from lead generation, right?
Yep.
You also, I got out of this, I really liked it, spending a lot of time networking for your long game. A lot of those networking relationships are probably more longer plays. And 15 years in, I have a feeling they've stead you well, and it was worth it. I love this. It's my new favorite quote of the week. A high tolerance for boredom is an underrated superpower. Probably one of the best truth bombs I've heard in a while.
Yeah.
A high tolerance for boredom is an underrated superpower.
Yep.
I heard learn to master one thing before you start another.
Mm-hmm.
And stack it on each other rather than scattergun it. I heard that.
Yeah.
I heard, master hiring, figure out how to hire, learn it. That is the one skill that to go from salesperson to business owner that you need.
lots of good nuggets in there. And I'm not an expert on all of them or any of them. I just know what I've failed on and where I've found success after falling on my face and getting back up several times.
In there. Well, Josh Anderson, Nashville, Tennessee, how can people get a hold of you, to send you their referrals and to just get more information? What's the best way?
Yeah. If you want to go to my website is joshandersonrealestate.com. And my email is josh@joshandersonrealestate.com.
Perfect. And awesome. Well, thank you, everybody. As always, we are here consistently, every single Wednesday for an hour at noon Pacific time. And we will, any of you guys on Zoom, on our mailing list, we always send our replay links after this. And if you're watching on the Pivot Shift Ahead page, it always stays on that page. So you can go to Wednesday webinar on that page and see all of our videos, including this one. And I would recommend you watch Josh a couple times. There's some really, really good stuff in there. Thank you, Josh Anderson. And we will see you next week to learn everything there is to learn about divorce real estate. Don't miss it. Have a good week, everybody.